All right, welcome to another YouTube Live, LinkedIn Live, and let's go ahead and jump into it. I was thinking this morning as I was running that of all the crazy things I've done throughout the years when it comes to health and fitness, so at one point in time, my workouts were literally like 2 hours long. I'm pretty sure we did every single machine that was available in the gym at that time. And if that's not even, I was so rigid also that I carried this container of rice with a precise amount. And then I also had my post workout shake ready to go right at the gym that I took with me. So I literally took a grocery bag with me because I was so worried about missing my post workout window. And I even went on a 30-day liquid diet of nothing but protein shakes. And of course, you had some flaxseed in there. And that was probably one of the worst ideas of my life. I do not recommend it. And, I've spent thousands on supplements, followed every type of protocol there is, and have obsessed over every single little tiny detail that there is. And when I think about these things, they all had this one thing in common, and that was time. I had plenty of time. I had no responsibilities. And really, that's it. So I had plenty of time. But here's the thing with that notion right there. Most entrepreneurs, CEOs, any sort of high level leader, they don't have that. And that's the problem. That's the incongruency and issue with most of the health and fitness advice today. Today's advice, or for the most part, it's built for people with time, not for people necessarily with significant responsibilities. Because if you think about it, if you're someone with 100 plus flights a year, or let's just say, you're gone 100 days out of the year, you have back-to-back meetings, you have different investor calls, you're scouting properties, you have family responsibilities at that, that perfect health plan right there, that's full of being rigidity. It's going to collapse and get thrown out the door. And so a lot of times when we see business leaders struggle with their health and fitness, it's definitely not an issue of motivation. You don't need to get you motivated to get off the couch. That's the last thing. And it's not an issue of discipline. It's actually an issue with the overall architecture of their plan. And so they're essentially operating off a blueprint that wasn't designed for their reality. And so even the strongest foundational cracks in this instance, if it's built for the wrong environment, the same thing's going to happen for someone's body. So if you've ever struggled with staying consistent, or if it's something that you're struggling with right now, or you're just simply trying to finish the year out strong, odds are you're just running the wrong operating system. And before I go any further, for those who are new here, or for those who are going to be watching this at a later time on the various platforms, my name is Julian Hayes II. I'm the founder of Executive Health. And, we help entrepreneurs, CEOs, and high-level leaders operate with world-class health and performance through precision systems and a team approach. And our mission is simple: to simply help you as a leader live and perform in alignment with your biology so you can, one, lead longer, think clearer, and feel unstoppable. And the reason why this is so important is because our health is the central key pillar of the three big principles of business, community, and most importantly, family. So if you're someone who is tired of, generic advice or advice that just seems so rigid for your lifestyle, then your odds are you're going to be in the right place here. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about something that I am asked from time to time. And I was actually just asked this this week, actually, is if you had 20 pounds to lose in 3 months without a crash diet, without sacrificing performance, what would you do? And this is exactly what I'm going to break down. But actually, now that I'm thinking, I have to mention, with these 8 steps, I'm not going to include peptides, Because if you're going to use peptides, then that definitely changes things. I'm a fan of peptides, but everyone's not into peptides, and that's probably needs to have its separate conversation. So we're just going to, for this conversation here, we're not going to think about if someone's using peptides as well, because that changes things. So let's get into it. So step one, first and foremost, maybe it's unexpected, but the very first step that I would recommend someone is to upgrade their identity. And so if you think about it, every single transformation begins with an identity shift. And this can even extend beyond just your health and fitness right now. For those of you who started a business, there had to be an identity shift before anything else, before anything could be built in this world. There had to be this internal drive, this internal shift that had to take place. For those of you who, you know, you had to get up the courage to go talk to the girl that you couldn't stop looking at. There had to be this internal drive, this identity shift to do that. So the same thing, when your goal is to lose 20 pounds, it's not just about tactics, especially when you are a busy professional, because there's so many other things going on that oftentimes health unintentionally gets placed on the back burner. So we cannot just rely on tactics. And I like to think about this as you're the type of entrepreneur now, you're the type of business leader who operates with a new standard. So statements like, I'm the type of leader who prioritizes their health before my business. I'm the type of entrepreneur who never negotiates my morning routine. I'm the type of individual who never has 2 bad meals in a row. You can keep on and on and on with these statements here. And the reason why I emphasize identity so much is because identity makes decisions automatic. It makes it easy to say yes. It makes it easy to say no whenever that's applicable. So the skip dessert, the morning walk, the workout, these are no longer things of where I have to exercise a bunch of willpower. These are things that are automatic because they go against or for your standard. So if you want a lasting fat loss system, it's not just about chasing pounds. I would tell you that I really don't care about numbers because the numbers are irrelevant. Because if you're taking care of the right things, it's going to happen automatically, and you don't even need to fixate on that. And that starts with upgrading your operating system. And so step 2 here is I want you to audit and assess. And if you think about this, no business leader is going to run their company without numbers, at least not for long. But on the contrary of things, most tend to run their health a little blindly, or if we want to be a little nicer, we can say a little more loosely than is probably needed. And when you're wanting to lose 20 pounds, you must measure. What you measure, that's totally up to you. You know, there's a wide gamut of things that you can measure. And when I'm talking with someone, I start simple just to maybe not overwhelm the person, or if they're not into all this. You know, something like a waist to height ratio is a tried and true method. Something like a body fat percentage, blood pressure. These are all very basic things that go with our day-to-day life. Now, me personally, I recommend people go a little deeper, especially with the segment that I tend to talk to, which is usually 35 and up. You've lived a little more of life, and so a lot of times you need to check under the hood because a lot of us are a little lagging in that department. So I look into things like a blood work, going deeper with a DEXA scan, looking into things like a VO2 max. And these are going to reveal, as I said, how your body is functioning beneath the surface. Because I like to think that metrics create accountability. There's a great book I read years ago. I might get the name wrong, but I think it's called Measure What Matters. And so don't quote me on that, but I think that's the name of the book title. And step 3 is to sync with your circadian rhythms. And if you think about this, every single cell in our body is going to run on circadian timing. This is the master signal. Um, the master signal, I know for a lot of us business people, a lot of times is our calendar. Our calendar runs our life, but in actuality, it's going to be light. And one particular example, I just got back from running this morning, but even before then, the first thing I do every morning is I wake up and I catch the sunrise. I have a crazy tan line going on right now because I wear a bandana when I run. Now, but to stay on subject, um, when we're missing morning sunlight, there's key opsin signaling that we're also missing as well. And you know, to explain this in a simpler way, our brain, our mitochondria is not getting the memo to burn fat, or at least to not do it as efficiently. And this morning light also builds something that maybe not as popular that people have heard about, but it's structured, or I think some people can call it easy water in your cells. And this powers the charge separation that's going to drive this mitochondrial energy. There's a great book by Gerald Pollack, and I think it's called The Fourth Phase of Water, if I remember correctly. But it talks all about this. It's a book I recommend for people who want to geek out and learn a little more about this. So start with that. But if you pair that with just the typical hydration that we're doing earlier in the day, this is creating a much, you're literally upgrading your fat burning. And I don't like to use the word fat burning, but it's a word that people understand. And this is a very easy thing to do to stack the conditions in your favor, to have a good morning routine. And it's applicable and it's accessible to all of us. And so to break this down here, get outside within an hour of waking, ideally catching the sunrise or at least soon afterward. At night, cut out artificial light. Darkness signals recovery, and many more things. And step 4 here after that is, now I want you to think about your nutritional standards. And when we think about nutrition and people use the word dieting, oftentimes we have this accompanying feeling of restriction and what I have to give up and all these things, right? I like to think about it as alignment, and keeping it simple as possible. There's a lot of things you can do. Some people love to count calories, macros, and all that stuff. I necessarily don't recommend it for most people. I think making better food decisions is an easy thing to do. Plus, getting your environment, particularly light, handled first and foremost is more important than food. That may be a little contrarian to say, but I don't think food is necessarily the very first thing to focus on. But I do have a few rules that I think will serve anyone well, as just a universal principle. And number 1 is to emphasize protein. Now, if you wanted a number, you can say 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight is a good starting point. In other terms, that's probably going to be 1 palm size portion per meal. If you're a bigger individual like myself, I'm almost 200 pounds, then maybe each meal is going to be 2 palms per that. So that's an easier way to do it, especially when you're traveling. You don't got time to input and count all these things, or you don't want to. And protein preserves muscle while you're losing fat. It keeps your energy stable. It also is going to help keep you a little more satiated as well. That tends to be a problem with people when they're trying to lose weight. And number 2 is I would prioritize DHA. And I think most people know about DHA solely as a healthy fat. But as I've learned this year, it's much more than that. DHL sits inside our cell membranes. It's capturing these photons of light, which is fascinating, I must say, and it turns these things into electrical signals. And so in plain speak here, how I think about this is, the more DHA we have, the better brain functioning we have, the better hormonal regulation we have, the better fat oxidation that we have, and also managing our natural clock. Okay. And so for me, at the basis of a diet, of a nutritional regimen, is emphasizing this. So I have a lot of different types of cold water seafood. So sardines, mackerel, salmon, roe, and then also you can also throw shellfish in there as well. And to me, these are non-optional foods. Now, if you need to, of course, maybe you can supplement, but it's not the same still. So, and I know sometimes people are worried about consuming too much of that. 99% of the people are not going to run into this type of issue at all. I've never seen it with anyone I talk to. And number 3 is timing. Timing is a huge thing. You know, if you listen to me for a while, if you read anything, you hear me talk about timing, you hear me talk about sequencing a lot. And so when it comes to this, I recommend stop eating 3 to 5 hours before bed. I think this single move along of giving yourself this window of not eating is going to lower inflammation, help your recovery, and push your body deeper into an overall state of healing. And I know intermittent fasting is a big thing, and I think people would actually be better served if they inverse that approach when it comes to fasting. A lot of people like to skip breakfast. I propose and think it's better to actually do the opposite. I think everyone should have a breakfast and then skip the late night meals. So go outside and then have your breakfast at least within 30 minutes of seeing that sunrise. That's going to put your clock more on its natural rhythm compared to doing it the other way. And so number 5 is we're going to talk about training here. And when people train, it's a lot of times it's people that just do the same thing over and over and over, year after year after year after year after year after year. And there's no sort of progressive overloading of anything. Or you have people where the training is just pretty much closing your eyes and grabbing a number out of a bag, and it's just going to be random. I like to think about training as sort of building like a diversified portfolio. I have 3 big pillars. I think about strength training because that's going to protect our joints, preserve our muscle, help our metabolism, and a bunch of other things. I think about conditioning, which is, of course, is sharpening our cardiovascular system so we become more resilient for our heart and a bunch of other things as well. And then I think about mobility, and I think this helps prevent the breakdowns, the injuries, helps with the fascia. And these 3 areas, I think, makes a nice portfolio when it comes to this arena. And before I go with more recommendations, I want you to think about when you are lifting and working out, you're not necessarily working out to lose your fat or anything right there. A lot of that action takes place outside the gym, outside the park, if you're running. You know, so I would separate those 2 things. Now, what do I recommend? I think as an absolute minimum, everyone should be lifting at least 2 to 3 times per week. I would prefer 3, but some people absolutely hate lifting weights. So you can at least do 2. And if you're going to do 2, then I would do full body, of course, and really just emphasize strength in this regard. So strength, when I say strength, I mean lifting weight that is challenging to you, and nothing like just super lightweight. I would do a steady amount of zone 2 cardio, and then I would at least have 1 high intensity session per week as well. And so by doing that core baseline there, we're going to hit every major pillar. And this is a nice minimum effective dose as well. I know, I think in the startup world, we talk about a minimum viable product. In the health world, especially with busy people, I like to think about what can keep you consistent, what is sustainable. If the world's falling apart, what can you still do? And then if you feel like doing more over time, After that identity has been solidified, then of course we can add more. We can ramp up the intensity. But as a core baseline, when you're getting yourself set, 2 to 3 strength sessions a week, steady zone 2, a couple times a week, 1 high intensity training session per week. This is simple, this is effective, and this is also easily repeatable. And for probably most importantly, this is something that's easily transferable whenever you're traveling, wherever you're going. So you can take this on the road. And so number 6, if you notice, I didn't say walking because this is part of what number 6 is going to be about. I want you to move more and find ways to strategically do this. So if training is going to build your ceiling, just daily moving, just being able to not sit for as long of periods, this is going to build your floor. And in that case, without that floor, then everything else is going to collapse. So I'm going to explain this a little bit, not to go into too much detail, but when we think about why this is so important to me, and this is something that's probably come to me over the past year or so as well. There's really no furnace when you're burning calories. When I think about movement, I think about electrons flowing. And we're not going to get too geeky, so just stay with me. Movement is going to generate this electrical charge that is, in a nutshell, literally cleaning out tissues and breaking down this stored fat. So when we're walking, we're not just burning calories. We're clearing fat from places like our bone marrow, visceral fat around our organs, and even fat stored in our joints and our connective tissue. So we can think of walking as a form of cellular housekeeping. We'll go with that. I like that. And 10 minutes after meals from walking, especially, and to double that, do it outdoors, is going to accelerate this. We'll use the word fat loss, weight loss. 2.5 hours a week of this type of activity cuts your cardiovascular risk by 30% and lowers premature death by 20%. Something as simple as walking. We can find times to walk. A lot of our meetings do not need to be where we're sitting down talking on Zoom. We can actually have some of these meetings while we're walking, and that can pass time. If you have two 15-minute meetings for the day, maybe we can move 2 of those 15-minute meetings to walking meetings. And now you've gotten 30 minutes of extra activity on top of the other work that we talked about in the previous step. Maybe part of our morning routine, we do 15 minutes of walking at the sunrise, and then we do 15 at sunset if possible. That's our 30 minutes for the day, and we find a time to work out that day. So you find these little pockets of time where we're just sitting, and we use that to get up and move and walk. So movement is going to break this matter, and then movement generates electricity. The more electricity that we generate, the more fat burning that goes on, quote unquote. So number 7 here is I want you to anticipate chokeholds. This is one of my favorite steps. Our weight loss efforts, fat loss efforts, any other type of fitness goal for the most part, it's not going to fall apart when we're at the gym. It falls apart in the various chokeholds that present themselves in our lives. So for a lot of us, this can be through weeks of travel. Some of us can be client dinners. Some of us at this time of the year, in a few weeks, when it starts, it's going to be the holiday calendar. All those temptations that are going to be placed in front of you. Everybody's going to be relaxing, all of these festivities going on. So the meter of temptations is going to rise. you can throw a whole assortment of other different types of potential chokeholds that are going to present to you. And these aren't a surprise. Well, I should say these are a surprise because I think this is a step that is not necessarily an exciting one to do. Um, to really take time to really think about. I want to look at my day to day calendar, my day to day life, what's going on in my life right now, and I want to think about what are maybe 3 to 5 things that pose the biggest risk to me not obtaining my goal. In this case here, in this subject is 20 pounds. So what are the 3 to 5 things that pose the biggest threat to me not getting those 20 pounds off in the next 3 months? You think about those 3 to 5 things, and then you have a counter for those. Of course, other things can happen that you don't expect, but at least you have the most likely things. And to me, life is a game of probability and anticipation. It's all about anticipation, it's all about probability. So if I'm going to travel, maybe I'm going to choose my hotel to see who has a pretty decent gym in there located already. Maybe I'm going to choose a hotel that has maybe a nearby park if I'm in a warm place at this time of the year. Or maybe I want to go to a gym, so I'm going to see how close I am to a gym. How close am I to what am I going to do with my food? Maybe I want some meal delivery that's going to come while I'm traveling and I'm going to have it at the hotel. Or maybe I'm going to there's a ton of different scenarios that you can use here. And you don't even have to get rigid with this, but you do need to have some semblance of a plan. So you're just not leaving everything up to chance because depending on how your mood is, how your emotions are, they can be very fleeting and that can lead to decisions in the short term that maybe feel good, but in the long term are detrimental to the actual goal. So it's always, you'll hear me say this a lot, lock in on the non-negotiable floor habits. So whether that's morning light, whether that's hydration, whether that's protein, that's walking, and at the time of the year, decide in advance how you'll handle the holidays parties or the late dinners. I don't think you have to be just, just robot and not enjoy none of these things. But I do think a little preparation, a little bit of anticipation is going to take you a long way. So one thing that I used to do, if I know I'm going to a dinner and I don't want to be the guy that's not enjoying none of this stuff, maybe I'm going to eat a little less throughout the day. So at my dinner, I can have the majority of my calories and enjoy the time with the people I'm with. Something as simple as that. Number 8, and this is a different one that most people don't talk about. But we'll see this, especially at the beginning of the year. And this is what I call the post goal void. And I want you to avoid this. This is where most people rebound. Most people will hit the 20-pound goal. They'll celebrate and then they'll drift back. And that's because, one, they skipped step 1, which was they never upgraded their identity and solidified it. A lot of times they were chasing a finish line that doesn't even exist. And this is what I mean by this. Health and fitness has no finish line. It's an ongoing process of refinement and evolution. So when you hit the 20-pound goal, set the next target, set the next milestone, set the next mission. Maybe that's to further improve your body composition. Maybe now you want to train for a half marathon. Maybe you just want to increase your strength. Whatever the case, we have to keep finding a way to build momentum. We have to keep. I remember as a little boy, I used to sit at my grandparents' house, and they had these soap operas. And I was always fascinated by soap operas because they had to produce every day, and they always had to have a storyline to keep going throughout the year. It's the same thing with wrestling in the WWE. My grandfather was a huge wrestling fan, And I was always amazed on how the storylines week in and week out continually um, keep going and evolving, and things never get stale. And it's the same thing here when it comes to your health and fitness. Once you have one goal accomplished, it's imperative to have something else to fill this gap, because if this gap is left unattended to, there's a high probability that you can revert back to your old ways. It's why we see people hit the proverbial roller coaster. They'll do good for 8 weeks, smooth sailing, and then all of a sudden they go down again. So it's a seesaw with their weight. 10 pounds up, 10 pounds down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to bring this home. If I had 20 pounds to lose and I wanted to do it in 3 months, and I'm a busy, time constrained professional, I would not use crash diets. I would not resort to starvation. I would not resort to endless cardio. It's actually a terrible idea because it's just going to spike your appetite even more. I would follow these 8 steps that I mentioned. They might not be the sexiest steps, but these are steps, nevertheless, that work with your biology, your psychology, and most importantly, your particular lifestyle. And they can be molded and fitted for that lifestyle. And so I leave you with this. We're toward the tail end of the year. If my math's correct, there's 70 something days left. I can't remember exactly because I forgot what today is. But will you coast into 2026 heavier, slower, and behind, and with not as much momentum? Or will you use this remainder of the year as your launch pad? You can still enjoy yourself, but you can also start building momentum toward the end of the year and for next year. And so it's with that said, if you are an entrepreneur or your leader, and perhaps you're ready to stop guessing and you would like more of a precise system as it pertains to your fat loss, your performance, and your longevity, definitely schedule a call. You can also DM me and reach out. And think of this whole process as building a board of directors for your health, so you can thrive in business, your community, and your family. And until next time, stay awesome, stay limitless, and of course, optimize today so you can lead tomorrow. Peace.